$1,400 was the cost of a monitor with these specs in 2021. Over the years, the price has dropped to where it stands now, $350 for a 27-inch IPS panel with 4K resolution and a 160Hz refresh rate. Maybe KTC doesn't ring a bell, but brands like Dell, HP, AOC, and ViewSonic are likely much more familiar. Well, KTC isn't exactly a new player here. In fact, they're the company behind manufacturing monitors for these brands. Not older models, but mainly the mid-range. And they've been doing that for years, gaining a lot of experience through quality control and, as important as that, at reduced costs. I want to make it clear that the brand sent me the monitor, but they didn't pay me, nor am I obligated to make this video. In fact, after trying it out, I've replaced my previous Asus monitor with this one because it simply feels like a step forward. You'd normally think that with all these specs on paper, there must be some downside, maybe something it lacks, like color representation. And although I feel like I still have a long way to go in color correction, moving from top brand monitors to this one doesn't feel like a step backward. It actually uses the same latest generation IPS panel that other brands call Fast IPS, which features a 1 millisecond response time and 92% color representation in DCI-P3. It's slightly more saturated, which is positive for consuming content or gaming, and I haven't had any issues with it for color correction, with uniform black levels, the ones you can expect from an IPS panel. The only sacrifice I've made by leaving my previous Asus monitor behind is going from 180 to 160 Hz, just a 10% reduction compared to the more than double increase in pixels on the same screen size. This upgrade brings clarity and sharpness, and since I spend a lot of hours reading or writing, I noticed the improved pixel density on text almost immediately. Typically, upgrading to 4K is for extra workspace in professional software like Adobe Premiere Pro or Blender. Sure, if you're coming from a 1080p monitor, it will be an improvement. But let me warn you, if like me, your previous monitor was a 27-inch 1440p, switching to this won't provide more workspace. Windows scaling makes the proportions identical to a 27-inch Quad HD monitor. And scaling is there for a reason. Without it, yes, you'd have more space, but all the elements would be really tiny. Windows basically keeps everything in proportion according to screen size and resolution. So at first glance, there might not seem to be an apparent advantage, but on closer inspection, I find it hard to go back to Quad HD because I quickly noticed the reduced pixel density. Now it's like having 4 1080p panels within one, allowing me to preview content in detail without having to switch to full screen mode constantly. So how does all this translate into gaming? There are benefits, no doubt, but also challenges. In AAA games, this resolution truly shines. We don't miss any details, and as long as your computer can handle it, the 160Hz make it feel less like a screen and more like a window to a new world. Recently, I've been playing Battlefield 2042 in those massive maps, and I've noticed that the faraway enemies, which appear smaller on the screen, are much easier to spot here. The higher pixel density becomes a competitive advantage in that aspect. Benefits also show up in close-up elements, like the textures on your weapon. Everything gains a new level of detail, but as I said, that's assuming your hardware can smoothly handle these many pixels. Switching to 4K for gaming is no joke. Fortunately, there's compatible with G-Sync or FreeSync, so FPS drops don't feel like stutters, maintaining that smoothness in gameplay. I'm currently playing with an RTX 3080 and haven't had any issues. In other games where details aren't as critical, like esports titles, response time becomes a priority. In this, I simply switched the resolution to 1440p, giving the computer more room and letting me enjoy 160Hz and a 1 millisecond response time thanks to the overdrive. Here, I want to add a side note. As with most monitors, the best setting isn't the fastest. Although there's a dynamic mode, I find the standard setting best for reduced ghosting, motion blur, and overshooting. But in this mode, we are not getting that advertised 1 millisecond response time. It's slightly above that mark, but as long as it is fast enough, I can't notice anything. One tip when playing at a resolution different from the monitors: to avoid that black screen when switching from the game to a Windows app, instead of reducing the in-game resolution, I do it within Windows. So while playing, I can switch to YouTube, for instance, without waiting for the resolution to change. Though Though a second monitor would be ideal for this, in my case an ergonomic and minimalist setup helps me avoid distractions, especially when working. In my opinion, the best way to have it is with a VC mount compatible with this monitor, allowing me to adjust it as I please. The build quality of the monitor does justice to the features it offers. It has a square stand that doesn't stick out too much, allowing you to rotate and move the monitor freely, and there's the usual joystick deal for menu navigation. The attention to detail even surpasses other brands, with bevels on the bottom bezel and an elegant minimalist look, with the only gaming accent being the pin cable slot and the rear panels, which are always hidden. All these features are complemented by two HDMI 2.1 and two DisplayPorts 1.4 inputs, allowing us to game from both computer and consoles. In the past, I thought that an experience like this, playing in 4K at over 100 FPS, was out of reach, but we can confidently say it's here. And it's not just because these monitors are becoming affordable, but because computers are becoming more powerful, handling these resolutions better. Brands like this one show that you can get all this for less, with nothing to envy from pricier competitors. And the price is around 350 euros here in Spain, and when I started preparing the video, the difference with top brands was over 100 euros. Now it's down to just 50, placing it at that midpoint where it's no longer a steal but rather a slightly cheaper option. Yet, I think the alternatives offer no real improvements, and if we choose to pay more, it's just for the brand name. Though I must admit, those better known brands will likely hold resale value better if you decide to sell it someday later on. So, would you save those 50 euros, or do you think it's worth going for a more recognized brand? And also a last touch that also demonstrates that this is not a sponsored video. If you're coming from a 27-inch 1440p monitor and you're planning to upgrade to this 27-inch 4K monitor, I don't think it's worth it. It's not. I've done it because I got it for free, but if I had to pay for this kind of upgrade, I wouldn't. I rather prefer to go for a 32-inch monitor 4K, which I think may have better options or better value for that size.